Alright, everybody. Today I'm having a late night study session on Khan Academy studying the U.S. Constitution. I'm taking a course called Constitution 101. I've never actually taken this course before, and it looks interesting, but yeah, I look forward to studying this. Social studies is actually my weakest subject, and it always has been my weakest subject in school, so I'm looking forward to doing this just because I feel like I could definitely use a refresher and maybe learn some things I haven't learned before. So, yeah, we're going to see how it goes. All right, here we go. And I'm not level 35 anymore, 39. Can hide this. I'm going to change the. There we go. All right. All right, here we go. Like I said, never did this before. It's all blank. Have my streak, but yeah. Let's see. Let's hope I learned something. Unit 1. Oh. Okay, let's do this. About this unit, get ready to explore the U.S. Constitution. In this unit, you'll learn how to understand this foundational document and to discuss how it shapes the U.S. government. I just feel like this is a really relevant topic for today. A lot of people saying this, that is unconstitutional. Let's see.
Hi, I'm Sal Khan, the founder and CEO of Khan Academy.
I'm Jeffrey Rosen, the president and CEO of the National Constitution Center.
So, Jeff, I'm super excited about this Constitution 101 course. Why should students be as excited as I am?
There's nothing more exciting than learning about the Constitution. It is the mission statement of America. It's what unites us. It is the ideals that allow us to have a productive democracy. Sal, I'm so excited to work with you to bring the essence of Constitution 101 to students across America. Well, what excites you about it?
That we're able to do this course with the National Constitution Center. There is no organization on the planet that understands the Constitution better and understands how it affects our everyday life. They really are the world leader here. But to be really making it a rich living course that have real world participants in our democracy talking about these very important ideals and ideas as they go into practice. But for it to not just be a passive class where you listen to a politician or you listen to a judge or you listen to an academic go deep, but you also as a student have the chance to participate in it, answer questions, make sure that you get mastery on the subject matter.
We brought together a group of the leading thinkers in America of diverse perspectives from the left, the right, and the middle to explore what they agree and disagree about the Constitution. We asked them, why should students learn about the Constitution? And everyone had a different answer, but it was so inspiring. Some people talked about it being a land of opportunity, extending the blessings of liberty to all, reminding us how far we have to come and how we've fallen short in the past and can learn from our mistakes. And they're really reminding us what unites us as Americans. We're divided about politics. It's a polarized time, but we're all united about the centrality and importance of our constitutional values.
I couldn't agree more. There's so much cynicism right now, especially about political discourse. And I think everyone watching is going to see that this is a place where people can disagree, but they can disagree in respectful ways. And we actually all benefit from that disagreement. So I think you're probably as excited as I am now to jump into this course. So let's get started. Jump in, start watching some videos, start reading some articles, start taking some of those exercises, those unit tests, those course challenges, and hopefully you're going to get just as excited about our Constitution and our democracy as myself and Jeff are.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that they did a collaboration like that. So, let's see. Welcome to Constitution 101. This course was created in collaboration. In collaboration with the National Constitution Center. With the support of the YAS Foundation, Constitution 101 will help you build a strong understanding of the U.S. Constitution, developments in the constitutional law, and key historical documents. Welcome to Constitution 101. Have you ever wondered what it takes to become a constitutional scholar? We built this course in partnership with the National Constitution Center to guide you into a deep dive of the United States Constitution and other major historical documents. The objectives of this course are to help you understand the Constitution's text, history, and structure, analyze key primary source documents and landmark U.S. Supreme Court cases, learn directly from constitutional scholars. Regardless of your familiarity with how the United States government works, this course will help you cultivate the knowledge and skills necessary to understand the U.S. Constitution and effectively analyze all sides of constitutional questions. As you progress through this course, you'll watch interviews with leading constitutional scholars and other thought leaders who explain how the Constitution has shaped the government throughout American history and continues to influence important debates today. In addition to the articles and videos of this course, we've included a number of exercises for you to complete. These are designed to help you apply the concepts you've learned to the world around you. So what are you waiting for? Dive in and get started on your journey to becoming a burgeoning constitutional scholar. Oh, my dog's just like right outside my door halfway through. Hey, let's try AP government class at your school if they offer it. Okay, interesting. Tips and things. So glad the section was expanded. Alright, video up next. Ooh. What is civil dialogue and why is it important? Drawing on the writings of Supreme Court Justices Louis Brandeis and Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jeffrey Rosen, President and CEO of the National Constitution Center, explains the central role civil dialogue has played in American democracy throughout history and today. Augmented transcript. Oh, interesting.
Why is it important to have civil dialogues? Why is it important to listen to perspectives that you may not agree with in advance? Well, according to the founders of the Constitution, all of American democracy depends on your mastering this skill, because having civil conversations is central to the discovery and spread of political truth, and also to the rights and responsibilities of self-government. And the whole theory of American government is contained in one of the most inspiring Supreme Court opinions in history. It's called Whitney versus California, and it was written in 1927 by a great Supreme Court justice called Louis Brandeis. And I'm going to recite this inspiring paragraph for you, and then let's think together about how it really expresses the core of the American idea. Here we go. Here's Louis Brandeis in Whitney versus California. Those who won our independence believed that the final end of the state was to make men free to develop their faculties, and that in its government, the deliberative forces should prevail over the arbitrary. They valued liberty both as an end and as a means. They believed liberty to be the secret of happiness and courage to be the secret of liberty. They believed that freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think are means indispensable to the discovery and spread of political truth. That without free speech and assembly, discussion would be futile. That with them, discussion affords ordinarily adequate protection against the dissemination of noxious doctrine, that the greatest threat to freedom is an inert people, that public discussion is a political duty, and that this should be a fundamental principle of the American government. Wow, they're such inspiring words every time I recite them. I'm struck by how true they are, and let's unpack what Brandeis is saying. They believe that liberty was the secret of happiness and courage was the secret of liberty. That's a quotation from Pericles' funeral oration. So Brandeis is channeling the ancient political philosophy of Plato and Aristotle, and he's also been reading Jefferson over the summer of 1920s.
Yeah, I need to pull up a dictionary. I do consider myself like a little bit above average intelligence, but sometimes I see some words. I don't freaking understand what's being said, so hold on. Okay, I just needed to see. What are these ads? Wikipedia. Okay. I don't need math right now.
And those words, they believe that freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think. Brandeis got,
They believe that freedom to think as you will and speak as you think.
although he didn't attribute them, to a letter from Thomas Jefferson in 1820, where Jefferson used the same words. And Jefferson got those words, again, without attributing them. I just figured this out by finding the primary source from a series of Whig pamphlets called Cato's Letters, which the founders quoted a lot. And the idea is that the freedom of conscience or freedom of the human mind is a natural right. And we have not only a right, but a duty to exercise our freedom of thought, because we have a duty to cultivate our faculties of reason. Being guided by reason is the only way for what Brandeis called the discovery and spread of political truth. In other words, in America, no one has a monopoly on truth. The government can't tell you what to think. Your fellow citizen can't impose his or her beliefs on you. It's only through the process of political discussion that the truth emerges. And the best response to evil counsels is good ones, Brandeis says. And generally, truth is supposed to emerge from the marketplace of ideas. But Brandeis' central idea in this piece is not just the marketplace of ideas, which was actually a phrase attributed to a colleague of his called Oliver Wendell Holmes, but the idea that public discussion is a political duty. The only way that government can be responsive to the will of we the people is if we are completely free to express our perspectives. And that means all perspectives. That means perspectives that you may agree with and those that you don't agree with. And it's only by allowing all of those clashing and diverse perspectives into the public square that government can reflect the will of the people, which only emerges through this process of deliberation and debate.
Well, I want to open Twitch real quick. There you go. All right, back at it.
So now you see what we're doing here together is crucially important. We're learning how to be engaged citizens exercising the duty of public discussion. It's not just a right that you have, the government can't tell you what to think, but it's also a duty that you have to express your opinions thoughtfully and deliberately after listening to other points of...
There's a lot of information. I think this is why social studies was my freaking weakest, because there's so much information and you only get it if you read or absorb the material. One of my history teachers told me it doesn't matter how smart you are. What's gonna determine if you succeed in the class is if you just read. So if you don't read, no matter how smart you are, you're not gonna succeed in the class. So yeah, I mean, back then when I was in high school, I was pretty freaking lazy. But yeah, I think I was kind of apprehensive to read so much material, and the textbooks we got were so dense, full of information. It's like every sentence was a new idea. So yeah, this is my chance to like really work on one of my weaker points. Yeah, I'm glad that I'm studying this now, and I kind of regret not paying attention before, but before in high school I just didn't have an interest in social studies at all other than psychology. But now I do have some sort of reason on why I should study this.
View. And it's that process thoughtfully and deliberately after listening to other points of view. And it's that process of listening to other points of view that allows you both to make your arguments persuasively, but also is a requirement of an open democracy. And that's why Justice Holmes, who I also mentioned, was so right when he said, the Constitution is made for people of fundamentally differing points of view. It's impossible to say it better, and that's why it's so important for you to listen to those differing points of view before you make up your own mind.
I like that. All right, let's see. Justice Stephen Breyer on civil dialogue at the Supreme Court.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Lofton, Constitution High School. Do you ever get into arguments with other members of the Supreme Court?
Yes.
And if you do, how do you solve those issues?
Well, what we do after we hear a case, we'll hear a difficult case, and then first, almost all of it's done in writing. I have these documents called briefs. I'm carrying them around with me now. I have them in my bag. I'll be getting to the bar coming up. And in each case, different sides file briefs. In the case I just talked about, there were 100 briefs. I could, the schools filed briefs. The Army filed a brief. There are all kinds of. So I read those. And maybe in a typical case, they're 10 or 15 pages. Then we'll have an oral procedure. And that is maybe half an hour each side. The lawyers will argue. We'll ask questions. Then within a day or two, we're in our conference room, the 9 of us. That conference room has a big table. It's probably about the size of the auditorium here. And we sit around the table. No one else is in the room. And we discuss the case. When we're discussing the case, the Chief Justice is here. He has a little book. He says the issue in this case is ... And here's how I feel. Then it goes to Justice Scalia, Justice Kennedy, Justice Thomas, Justice Ginsburg, me, Justice Alito, Justice...
Dang. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is still alive when this video is made.
Sotomayor, Justice Kagan. We each have a book, and we each write down what the others say. Because if I didn't write down what you said, for example, and I had to write the decision, you might not agree with it. So I write down what you said. Then there's back and forth discussion. I listen to what you said. And I try to see if I have something that's relevant to what you're talking about. It isn't just who has the better argument. It's a question of listening to each other. Now, on the basis of that discussion, we work out, well, how we're probably going to decide the case. The case is then assigned to one of us to write, and we write a little essay. And we circulate it in the court. And I hope that the other judges, or at least 5, will join my opinion. If they don't, they might write a dissent. Eventually, everybody joins an opinion, or writes a dissent and joins that. And that's the end of the case. Majority rules. If there are 5 or more, that's the answer. Now you are an expert. And your real question is, does that discussion make a difference? And the real answer is yes. When you talk about argument, you're thinking, well, how do we do that argument? Do we shout at each other? I mean, some of these are pretty contentious cases. No, we don't shout at each other. I've been there for 20 years. I have never heard in that room, never heard one justice raise his voice and shout at another. This does not happen. I have never heard one judge say something rude or make a joke about another. It doesn't happen. It's civil, and it's polite, professional, even though we might strongly disagree. I've learned over time that if you have a friend and you disagree about something, and you're in a big argument, what works best is stay calm. Stay calm. Listen to what he's saying. Try to deal with what he's saying, not with what you're saying. What do you think he's thinking about? He's thinking about what he's saying. He's not thinking about what you're saying, otherwise he'd agree with you. And so listen to him and stay calm. If you do not stay calm, he's going to think, my God, that guy's really emotional. He must be wrong. Isn't that how people think? Yeah. So therefore, what I've learned is the 2 rules in there, in that conference room: don't speak twice until everybody has spoken once. That is a great rule for whatever group you're involved in, because everybody thinks they've been treated fairly. And then, stay calm, and listen, and respond to what the other person has said. You would be surprised. You would be surprised at how often people work things out. And if you do, you don't even have to get into court in the first place.
Interesting.
We've got problems, and so rather than focus on what divides us, the way you solve problems is to try to build consensus to solve them. That requires civil discourse. You and I don't know how many places we disagree, but we don't focus on that. We focus on the things where there's agreement, and where you might disagree with me. I don't think you're the enemy. I might think you're wrong, and we could have a lively debate about that, or you might think I'm wrong and try to persuade me. But right now, if someone disagrees with you at the extreme, it's a form of violence. Like, you're in my space and I want safety. Rather than say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That's a unique situation that we need to avoid. And so I think creating these fora, which you have done magnificently at the National Constitution Center, to have people with diverse views on a subject and allow that dialogue where people learn from each other in a very civil manner is hugely important. We need thousands of those right now, and a little less of the screaming and yelling at each other. I was governor 20 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, but it's like ancient history compared to today. Our first impulse, and I would say this wasn't just me, it was political leaders in that era, my first impulse when I had an idea that I wanted to implement was to find someone that didn't look like me, didn't agree with me on many things, but there was common ground on that one thing, and to forge a consensus and build a partnership around that fact that we agreed on this issue to build, to build out from there to get a policy objective done. So we need to start getting to the solutions part of this, and that requires civil discourse far better than what we're doing now.
Okay, background, constitutional conversations and roles and norms. Before engaging in a constitutional conversation, it's important to make sure that everyone understands their role and how they will be expected to participate. You, as a student, will be expected to help establish norms of successful constitutional conversation, participate in discussion, working as a team to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to share, reflect on your own performance, noting helpful contributions and areas for improvement, reflect on your new understandings of constitutional texts. Your teacher will be expected to help establish norms for successful constitutional conversation. I don't have a teacher, so I don't know how relevant this is going to be. Model the skills associated with the conversation throughout the class. Observe and record the flow of the discussion and the credit earned by the students. In addition to understanding their roles, all participants work together to create a list of norms or guidelines for the conversation that everyone agrees to follow. Creating norms is a great first step in preparing for your constitutional conversation, and the norms you create together can even be used for all classroom activities throughout the year. Practical guidelines. Some norms will be more practical, meant to better facilitate the conversation in your classroom. An example of this could be that everyone must speak once before anyone can speak twice. Non-negotiable habits. Other norms will be non-negotiable. We call that a rule. These are essential habits needed to build effective discussions and learning in any classroom. For example, at the National Constitution Center, we choose to always focus on constitutional questioning, examining what the government may do and what it may not do. Oh. Okay. Oh, I remember reading this. In 11th grade, I think I read this. Primary source: George Washington, farewell address. Summary: In 1796, President George Washington published his farewell address to the nation. After 2 terms in office, Washington decided to retire from public life, clearing the way for the peaceful transfer from power from one president to another. This was one of the crowning achievements of the early American Republic and an important precedent for future presidents. In his powerful valedictory address, Washington called for national unity and focused on threats at home and abroad. At home, Washington feared the rise of political factions. Abroad, he warned of the dangers of foreign entanglements. For Washington, both foreign influence and newly emerging political parties threatened liberty and undermined the promise of Republican government. For the American Republic to survive, the American people and their elected leaders had to commit to lives of civic Republican virtue, valuing reason over passion and the public good over private self-interest. Ooh, I like that. Keep that. Avoid let's give 2 warnings. I don't remember this too much. Okay, document. Friends and citizens. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as a matter of serious concern that any grounds should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to entice a belief that there is a real difference in local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. Political parties threaten to divide and make people often through deception. Okay. To the efficacy and permanency. Oh, dang it. I could not understand a single word that I just read. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. Okay, there we go. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. To the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government for the whole is indispensable. No alliance, however strict, between the parts can be an adequate substitute. They must inevitably experience the infractions and interruptions which all alliances in all times have experienced. Sensible of this momentous truth, you have improved upon your first essay by the adoption of a constitution and government better calculated than your former for an intimate union, and for the efficacious, how do you say this?
Efficacious.
For the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of our own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles and the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, had a just claim to your confidence and your support. Okay. The American people formed this new government through the liberation and free choice. Nice. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures, and our duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make sure that and to alter their constitutions of government. But the constitution which at any time exists, till changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all. But the Constitution, which at any time exists, is sacredly obligatory upon all. I like that. I'm going to keep that. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish the government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. All obstructions to the executions of the laws, all combinations and associations, under whatever plausible character, with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities, are destructive of this fundamental principle and a fatal tendency. So, okay. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation the will of the party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, and, according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous project of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interests. The American people must steer clear of factions that threaten to spur divisions and undermine rules of law. Together we must value our love of the nation over the partisan pull of political parties. Parties are motivated by passion and self-interest, not reason and a commitment to the common good. Dang. Glad they had these annotations. However, combinations or associations of the above description may now and then answer popular ends. The political parties are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines, by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Demagogues will harness parties to seize power, undermine popular self-governance, and abuse rights of the people. Dang. He's right about that. Excuse me. I've already intimated.
Intimated.
Okay. I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them and geographical discriminations. Let me know now a more comprehensive view, and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. Dang, he's right about that. They kind of are. The spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passions of human mind. In the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed. But in those of the popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly the worst enemy. Partisanship flows from human nature and is most dangerous in popular forms of government like democracies and republics. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. Okay, so I'll read that sentence again. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able, more fortunate than his competitors, turns his disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. Partisan conflicts often spiral out of control and lead to tyranny, with demagogues seizing power and abusing the liberty of all people. Without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought to be entirely out of sight, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. Restrain partisanship. Dang. It serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. Dang. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption, which finds a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions. Thus, the policy of the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. Partisanship undermines wise leadership and effective government. It inflames party passion in the wider community, leading to jealousy, anger, panic, and sometimes mob violence and insurrection. It encourages foreign meddling in American politics. Above all, it divides American people into this republic. Dang, he's like, oh my gosh, he's so ahead of his time. It's ridiculous. Sure, let's read this entry. Oh, that wasn't all of it. I'm going to read the rest of it. Okay, let's see. Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens, the jealousy of the people ought to be constantly awake. Of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. But the jealousy to be useful must be impartial, else it becomes an instrument of the very influence to be avoided, instead of a defense against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those who they actuate to see danger only on one side, and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and the confidence of the people to surrender their interests. The great rule of conduct for us is to regard to foreign nations. For us, in regard to foreign nations, is in extending our commercial relations, to have them as little political connection as possible. So far, we have already formed engagements. Let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has set of primary interests, has a set of primary interests to which to us have none, or a very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics, and the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships or enmities. Enmities. What is this? Oops, shit.
Enmity.
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 Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course. If we remain one people under an efficient government, the period is not far when we may defy material injury from external annoyance. When we may take such an attitude as will cause the neutrality we may at any time resolve upon to be scrupulously respected. When belligerent nations, under the impossibility of making acquisitions upon us, will not lightly hazard the giving us provocation. When we may choose peace or war, as our interest, guided by justice, shall counsel. Why forego the advantages of so peculiar a situation? Why quit our own to stand upon foreign ground? Why, by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? See this word all the time. What the hell does this mean? Unpredictable change. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we know now, we are now at liberty to do it. For let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense, but in my opinion, it is unnecessary, and would be unwise to extend them. Interesting. Alright. Thomas' first inaugural address. Okay. The election of 1800 was one of the most important elections in American history. Following a bitter contest, Thomas Jefferson defeated John Adams, marking the first time in American history that an incumbent president lost a re-election bid. This led to the peaceful transfer of power from one president and political party to another, in the process setting an important precedent for early America and an example for the rest of the world. On March 4th, 1801, Jefferson was sworn in as the third president of the United States. In his first inaugural address, Jefferson called on the American people to approach one another with civility and magnanimity. Magnanimity. It's a tough word. famously announcing, "We're all Republicans, we're all Federalists." To that end, Jefferson discussed the need for his fellow Americans to unite in common efforts for the common good, the importance of equal rights for political minorities, and the value of the American people uniting with one heart and one mind, and restoring that harmony and affection without liberty, and even life itself, are but dreary things. During the contest of opinion through which we have passed, the animation of discussions and of exertions has sometimes worn an aspect which might impose on strangers unused to think freely and to speak and to write what they think. But this being now decided by the vote of the nation, announced according to the rules of the Constitution, all will, of course, arrange themselves under the will of law, and unite the common efforts for the common good. We've just engaged hard for our election. Now it's time to come together. We remain committed to the rule of law and work together to pursue the common good. Okay. All, too, will bear in mind the sacred principle that though the will of majority is in the case of to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possesses their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. Because the majority has the power to rule, but as long as let's then, fellow citizens, unite one in heart and one in mind. Let's restore to social intercourse that harmony and affection without which liberty and even life itself are but dreary things. Social intercourse, that harmony and affection without liberty. Can it be? And let's reflect that, having banished our land that religious intolerance under which mankind has so long bled and suffered, we have yet gained little if we countenance a political intolerance as despotic, as wicked, and capable of as bitter and bloody persecutions. During the throes and convulsions of the ancient world, during the agonizing spasms of infuriated man, seeking through blood and slaughter his long-lost liberty, it was not wonderful that the agitation of the billows should reach even this distant and peaceful shore, that this should be more felt and feared by some and less by others. Excuse me. I should divide opinions as to measure of safety, but every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have called by different names brethren of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. We may have separated into separate parties during the recent election, but we are all part of one nation. We may hold different opinions on specific issues. We all believe in America's souls. The American idea unites us. I like that. If there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated, where reason is left free to combat it. Oh, that's cool. I like that. I know indeed that some honest men fear that a Republican government cannot be strong, but this government is not strong enough. But would the honest patriot, in the full tide of successful experiment, abandon a government which has so far kept us free and firm on the theoretic and visionary fear that this government, the world's best hope, may by possibility want energy to preserve itself? I trust not. I believe this, on the contrary, the strongest government on earth. I believe it the only one where every man, at the call of the law, would fly to the standard of the law, would meet invasions of the public order as his own personal concern. Sometimes it is said that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he, then, be trusted with the government of others? Or have we found angels in the forms of kings to govern him? Let history answer this question. Some are skeptical of our government, but now is the time to abandon the American experiment. So far, the government has protected our liberties and proven strong enough to keep us safe. I believe that everyone would stand up to protect the nation if it was threatened by our enemies. about to enter, fellow citizens, on the exercise of duties which comprehend everything dear and valuable to you. It is proper you should understand what I deem the essential principles of our government, and consequently those ought to shape its administration. I will compress them within the narrowest compass they will bear, stating the general principle, but not all its limitations. Equal and exact justice to all men, of whatever state or persuasion, religious, political, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none, the support of the government in all their rights as the most competent administrations for our domestic concerns and surest bulwarks against anti-republican tendencies, the preservation of the general government in its whole constitutional vigor as the sheet anchor of our peace at home and safely abroad, a jealous care of the right of election by the people, a mild and safe corrective of abuses which are lopped by the sword of revolution where peaceable remedies are unprovided, absolute acquiescence in the decisions of the majority, the vital principles of republics, from which is no appeal but force, the vital principle and immediate parent of despotism, a well-disciplined militia, our best reliance in peace for the first moments of war till regulars may relieve them, the supremacy of civil over the military authority, economy in the public expense, that labor may be lightly burthened, the honest payment of our debts and sacred preservation of the public faith, encouragement of agriculture and of commerce as its handmaid, the diffusion of information, arraignments of all abuses at the bar of the public reason, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom of person under the protection of the habeas corpus, and trial by juries impartially selected. Dang. As I get ready to become president, I want to share with you what I take to be the core principles of American equality, relations with other nations, commitment to federalism, a national government that protects us, free elections, majority rule, strong militia, civilian control of the military. Oh. A commitment to paying off our nation's debts, promotion of agriculture and business, the free spread of ideas, a commitment to reason, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, checks of unfair detention by the government, protection of the right to a jury trial. These principles form the brightest constellation which has gone before us and guided our steps through an age of revolution for reformation. The wisdom of our sages and blood of our heroes has been devoted to their attainment. They should be the creed of our political faith, the text of civic instruction, the touchstone by which to try the services of those we trust, and we should wander from them in moments of error or of alarm. Let us hasten to retrace our steps, to regain the road which alone leads to peace, liberty, and safety. We should continue to guard our nation, for his thinkers believed in them, and our bravest preachers bled for them. All right.
I would say it's very important for students not to be too cynical when they think about American politics. The fact that a debate is partisan doesn't mean that it's self-interested, doesn't mean that it's about money or power. Our parties often really are divided about fundamental questions. Having worked in and around government for a long time, I worked for a president, I worked for a Speaker of the House, the hardest thing to see and to accept is that everybody means well and believes that they're operating in good faith. That oftentimes they're wrong, but they're not usually wrong because they're acting cynically or selfishly. And so you do have to dig beneath that cynicism and ask yourself, what really are they arguing? What's the substance here? Read Federalist 1, and Alexander Hamilton makes a wonderful case for taking politics seriously there. And I think, hard as it is to do, it's very important to try.
These articles are like really difficult to read, I'm not gonna lie. Alexander Hamilton. Background: on October 27, 1787, Alexander Hamilton published the opening essay of the Federalist Papers. Federalist Number 1. The Federalist Papers were a series of 85 essays printed in newspapers to persuade the American people, and especially Hamilton's fellow New Yorkers, to support ratification of the new Constitution. The essays were written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, all three authors writing under the pen name Publius. On September 17th, 1787, delegates of the Constitution Convention had signed the new Constitution. This Constitution was the framers' proposal for the new national government. But it was only that, a proposal. The framers left the question of ratification, whether to say yes or no to the new Constitution, to the American people. And the framer... What the heck is the framer? What the heck is a framer? In the framers' view, only American people themselves had the authority to tear up the previous framework of government, the Articles of Confederation, and establish a new one. The ratification process itself embodied one of the Constitution's core principles, popular sovereignty, or the idea that all political power is derived from the consent of we the people. In Federalist Number 1, Hamilton captured this vision well, framing the stakes of the battle over ratification. In this opening essay, Hamilton called on the American people to deliberate on a new constitution and prove the world that they were capable of choosing government based on reflection, choice, extent, and force. Document excerpt. After an unequivocal experience of the inefficiency of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks on its own importance, comprehending its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an entire, in many aspects, the fate of an empire, in many respects, the most interesting in the world. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reversed to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, whether they are forever destined to depend upon their political constitutions on accident and force. If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which the decision is to be made, and a wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind. As Confederation were failure the debate over ratification of the Constitution is great importance. American people must decide for themselves whether to adopt the new Constitution. Themselves whether to adopt the Constitution. The decision will show the world whether the people are capable of establishing a Republican government based on reflection and choice rather than accident and force. Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of power, emolument, consequences of office they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with fairer prospects. I'm off camera. Prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies, then from its union under one government. So what does that mean? Some groups may look to act out of self-interest during this important debate. Oh man. Okay. Almost there. It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observations of their nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men, merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interested or ambitious views. Candor will oblige us to admit that such men may be actuated by upright intentions, and it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance, or may hereafter make its appearance, will spring from sources, blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. So numerous indeed and so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment, that we, upon many occasions, see wise and good men on the wrong side, on the wrong, as well as the right set of questions of the first magnitude of society. The circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so persuaded of being in the right of any controversy. And further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always that those who advocate the truth are influenced by pure principles and their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives may not more laudable than these, are apt to operate as well upon those who support those who oppose the right side of a question. Whether or not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than the intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties. For in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Here, heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. Raise the value of civil dialogue, assuming the best of his opponents, urging moderation. He said all that here? Jeez. I'm struggling reading this. I'm not gonna lie. The verbiage is so long, and I don't even know if this is. I don't know how much information I can actually grab from reading all this. Okay, annotation. Even so, Hamilton is optimistic that the ratification debate will avoid passionate appeals, which each side boldly proclaiming their own correctness and bitterly criticizing their opponents. Beware of demagogues claiming to speak for American people. And yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that will happen in this as all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to evince the justness. Yeah, there's so many words I don't even use. Show clearly. Oh, like convince. Yeah, and evince the justice of their opinions. To increase the number of their converts by the louding of their declamations and bitterness of their invectives. What the heck is this? Dude, I can't read this. Oh my god. Invective. Bitterness of their invectives. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as offering to profound. Okay, dude, I'm just. Jesus. Hamilton concludes by explaining the purpose of Federalist papers to respond to many critiques of the Constitution already emerging in the debates over ratification.
I think young people should learn about everything for the best reason of all, which is that it's fun. I mean, there are lots of things that are fun, But learning is one of them, and learning is one of the few things that are fun that if you do too much of it, it's not bad for you. Everything else that you do that is fun, you can't do too much of it. Only two things I know of you can't do too much of that's fun. One is music. You can listen to it too loud, but you can't listen to it too much. It doesn't have a negative effect on you if you enjoy music all your life. And learning. I'm 83 and I'm learning. It's my only fun, really, in a sense. But it's a lot of fun. And that's why I do it. And begin to understand for young people why things are the way they are. And to realize that they're not really like they are because of what they've been told. They're the way they are because of the way they evolved over long periods of time. Nothing is more fun than to learn.
Okay, here we go. Yes, 4 questions. According to Jeffrey Rosen, what is the requirement of an open democracy? Okay, that was pretty obvious. Oh no. Don't tell me, did I just lose internet connection? Oh shoot. Here we go. What is true about the nature of discussions between justices of the Supreme Court? The justices occasionally raise their voices. No. The justices are civil, polite, and professional, even if they strongly disagree. The justices are more likely to engage with politically aligned justices. No. The justices will only speak in order of seniority to ensure. No. These distractors are so obvious. Going to Alexander Hamilton, what was the purpose of the frivolous papers? The argument's ratification. To argue. Oh. I saw Constitution. I was like, oh, that's the right answer. Justice Breyer suggests the following tip for having a conversation with a group of people. Don't speak twice until others. To whom should this suggestion apply? Bonus question, yes. Supreme Court, Whitney versus California, which justice emphasized the importance of civil dialogue. Yeah. I'm so nervous doing these questions. Oh my god, this is like my weakest freaking subject. Okay. Oh my god. Yes. Oh my god. Hazard has a different definition. Oh, okay. Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished by obvious interests of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard diminution of power, emolument, and consequences of the office they hold under their establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men who hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country or flatter themselves with a fair prospect. Among those formidable obstacles the new constitution will encounter will be distinguished by obvious interests of a certain class of men in every state. Diminution of power. Emolument. By confusions of the country or flatter themselves with fair prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies, then from its union under one government. Yes. Hamilton expresses concern that individuals may resist constitutional changes due to self-interest, either to maintain their own positions of power or to take advantages of opportunities that emerge from political fights taking place. Mrs. Zuniga, a civics teacher, asked students to prepare materials and arguments for a debate whether The death penalty is consistent with the Eighth Amendment. What is the most important action a student could take to help them craft an effective constitutional argument? Practice what they're going to say, make sure the argument is heard. Read arguments from constitutional scholars. Focus on scholarly material that supports the side. Watch crime shows. The most important action. Focus only on scholarly material that support the side of debate. No, it's definitely not C. Watch crime shows. Not that. Read arguments from constitutional scholars about the issue. Is that the most important action? Practice what they're going to say to make sure their argument is heard. What the fuck? While practice can improve how you deliver an argument, is the most important step when crafting. Engaging scholarly arguments provides you with diverse perspectives. Alright, whatever. I get triggered when I see that word. This doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated to as votaries enough to countenance and open a vowel to it. I like how they don't define a vowel. Affirmation. So, vowel to it. For nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternate adoption of a new constitution or dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that union, the certain evils, and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Based on the Federalist Papers are an example of which of the following continents. Approval. Fuck. Damn it. Why isn't it this? Defending the proposed constitution. Okay. Which statements of cynicism, dialogue. I'm gonna do that again. But the origin of the American public is distinguished by peculiar circumstances. Other nations have been driven together by fear and necessity. The governments have generally been a result of a single man's observation, or the offspring of particular interests. The formation of our Constitution, the wisdom of all ages is collected. The legislators of antiquity are consulted, as well as opinions and interests of millions who are concerned. In short, it is an empire of reason. In the formation of such government is not only the right, but the indispensable duty of every citizen to determine the principles of it, to compare them with principles of other governments, with a constant eye to our particular situation and circumstances, and thus endeavor to foresee the future operations of our own system and its effects upon human habits. How come I can understand this better than the other writings? In their civics class, Ha-Yoon and her classmate, Luciana, debate whether the government should tax soft drinks and candy to promote more nutritious habits. Ha-Yoon claims the government has a responsibility to protect its citizens and should tax unhealthy foods and drinks to improve overall health. Luciana notes that Ha-Yoon made some good points, but argues that tax on foods and drinks give the government too much power and discourage individual choice. At the end of the debate, Ha-Yoon and Lucy shake hands and agree to disagree. This scenario is an example of which of the following practices. In a classroom discussion about policy, Rena says the government needs to spend more money to help people who did not make a living wage. Paul disagrees with Rena. Which statement could Paul make to challenge Rena's argument without being cynical? People need assistance from governments are just lazy. Nope. The policy you're proposing is a long-term solution, and there are several good reports that show this approach can do more harm than good. Government does not care. Wouldn't know how much to spend money anyways. Now you have a new policy passing both houses is relatively low. And there are several reports that show that this approach can do more harm than good. The likelihood of a new policy passing both houses of Congress is relatively low, as both parties have rejected similar. Yes. There's a town hall meeting where citizens debate a proposed new zoning law. The law will allow for the construction of a large apartment complex in an area that is currently zoned only for single-family homes. Tempers are rising. People in favor of the laws argue that the complex will address the town's affordable housing shortage. Opponents worry about increased traffic and decreased property values. One resident shouts, "You only care about lining your pockets with real estate developers." Another resident replies, "You just want to keep out anyone who isn't rich." Which of these approaches would best promote civil and productive dialogue in this situation? I should remind everyone that the zoning decision has already been made. Should engage residents to express their anger, failing in this way. Should acknowledge residents' concerns, but redirect the conversation towards areas of agreement and potential compromises. There we go. Ooh.
Today we're going to walk through the Constitution of the United States. Let's begin with the preamble. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. I'd love to read the preamble. And it's so significant, of course, that the Constitution begins with the words, we the people. They remind us that we the people of the United States have the sovereign power, not the king, not the legislature, not the president, not the judiciary. We the people, we parcel it out to the various branches of government that the Constitution is about to create, but the power remains in the people themselves. Now let's talk about Article 1, which establishes the legislative branch. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Now, for the framers, Congress was supposed to be the most powerful and therefore threatened to be the most dangerous branch. James Madison worried in Federalist 48 that the legislative department is everywhere extending the sphere of its activity and drawing all power into its impetuous vortex. That's why it's the longest of the substantive articles. It sets out a whole lot of different powers of Congress and also the powers that are denied to Congress. For example, it grants Congress the power to lay and collect taxes, but it denies Congress the powers to grant titles of nobility. Now, Article 2, the executive branch. It's amazing how much shorter it is than Article 1. It says that the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. Article 2 then sets out a few specific powers that the President has, like being Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and also the power to receive ambassadors and to make treaties by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. That's a blended power. It's not one exclusive to the President. But so much of our current presidency includes implied powers that have collected over time, where the presidents have simply assumed or asserted. The actual language of the Constitution is sparse, reminding us that the framers thought of the President as a kind of impartial chief magistrate who would administer laws passed by Congress, but Congress, not the President, would be the main actor. Now, Article 3, the judicial branch. Article 3 says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may, from time to time, ordain and establish. So that tells us that the Supreme Court is the head of the judicial branch, but it's only one of the federal courts that have the power to decide questions involving federal law, and that Congress may create those inferior courts, but it doesn't have to. Now, Article 3 also says there's a very narrow category of cases that the Supreme Court has to hear as a matter of what's called its original jurisdiction. But broadly, the Supreme Court has the discretion to hear or not to hear whatever cases it likes.
Oh my god, we got a freaking botter right here. Freaking. Yeah, of course you created. Oh my gosh. Of course your account was made 14 hours ago. Yeah, of course you created. Oh my gosh. Of course your account was made 14 hours ago. Yeah, of course you created. Oh my gosh. Of course your account was made 14 hours ago. Yeah, of course you created. Oh my gosh. Of course your account was made 14 hours ago. Yeah, of course you created. Oh my gosh.
And it tends to hear cases when there's a conflict among the lower federal courts involving significant questions of the interpretation of federal law. Article 4, this involves states and citizenship and the admission of new states. It has a really important clause called the Comity Clause, or the Privileges and Immunities Clause. That says, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. That means that if I'm a citizen of Pennsylvania and I go to Virginia, I can take my basic civil rights with me. I can make contracts. I can sue and be sued. But I don't take my political rights with me. I can't walk into a courthouse and serve on a Virginia jury or walk into a Virginia election and vote in that election. So Article 4 establishes...
What?
But I don't take my political rights with me. I can't walk into a courthouse and serve on a Virginia jury or walk into a Virginia election and vote in that election. So Article 4 establishes certain fundamental rights or civil rights or privileges or immunities, and it says that they're portable. Article 5 sets out the amendment process. This is hugely important. It tells us how we change the Constitution. And Article 5 says there are two ways of proposing an amendment and two ways of ratifying it. So here we go. Article 5 says Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So Congress can propose the amendment by 2/3 vote, or if 2/3 of the state legislatures ask, then...
Okay, proposal phase. Whoa. Proposal phase. 2/3 members of Okay.
And Congress has to call a convention for proposing amendments. And then Article 5 says that these proposed amendments shall be valid to all intents and purposes when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states or by conventions in 3/4 thereof. So two ways of ratifying, either 3/4.
Ratified by the states. 3/4 of the states ratifying. Oh, jeez. It didn't switch back. Oops. Yeah. Votes in the state legislatures or votes by state ratifying conventions.
So the legislatures can ratify, or conventions in 3/4 of the states can ratify. That sounds very complicated, and that's by design. Article 5 makes the Constitution very hard to amend. Because of that, we've had a whole lot of amendments proposed in our history, but not a whole lot have been ratified. The 27th Amendment, recognized as valid in the 1990s, was the last ratified amendment to the Constitution. And that's because Article 5 was designed to slow down deliberation, to ensure that amendments represent the considered will of we the people and can qualify as the supreme law of the land. And speaking of the supreme law of the land, that brings us to Article 6, which includes the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. The Supremacy Clause is hugely important as well, because it means that if a state passes a law that clashes either with the Constitution or with federal law, the Constitution trumps, and federal law trumps. And the Supreme Court derives its power to strike down unconstitutional federal and state laws that clash from the Constitution from the Supremacy Clause itself. Maybe just one quick beat on this power of judicial review, or the power of courts to strike down unconstitutional laws. Alexander Hamilton said in Federalist 78, whenever there's a clash between the will of the people represented by the Constitution and the will of their representatives embodied in ordinary laws, judges should prefer the principal to the agent. In other words, because we the people are the sovereign power, as the preamble reminded us, and our will is embodied in the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, as Article 6 reminds us, then our will has to trump the will of our temporary and fallible representatives. And finally, ratification. Article 7 says, ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratifying the same. That's different than the rule of the Articles of Confederation, which required unanimous consent. And that's why when New Hampshire in 1788 ratified the Constitution, it became the supreme law of the land, even though there were still 4 states that had to ratify, and it took them another year.
Wait.
About all 7 articles of the U.S. Constitution. And finally, ratification. Article 7 says, ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratifying the same. That's different than the rule of the Articles of Confederation, which required unanimous consent. And that's why when New Hampshire in 1788 ratified the Constitution, it became the supreme law of the land, even though there were still 4 states that had to ratify, and it took them another year. And now we've talked about all 7 articles of the U.S. Constitution. And we can sum up by saying, what is the Constitution of the United States?
Supreme law of the land.
It establishes the government of the United States, and it defines its powers and limits. And, as Article 6 says, the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land.
Federation had to unanimous ratification. Okay.
What is the Constitution?
The Constitution is, again, a long-term, long-run document, and it recognizes that in the short run, majorities will sometimes want to veer away from it. They may not find equal protection popular today. They may not find other rights, free speech rights, popular tomorrow. They may not find freedom of religion particularly attractive the next day, and they may want to impinge upon those fundamental rights. Well, those rights were approved by the people in the Constitution, and you have an opportunity to come to an independent judge and say, yes, the short-run, the short-sighted lawmakers or executive of today may want something, but the Constitution that the people approved and that is the supreme law says otherwise. And a judge exists and has to have the fortitude to be able to say, yes, you're right, the Constitution does provide equal protection, free speech, freedom of religion, and you win. You win, even though you're deeply unpopular today. And that's the long-run view that Madison had of the Constitution and the judges roll in.
Okay, finally, regular English. This article is taken from the National Constitution Center up at the Constitution FAQ page. What is a constitution? The U.S. Constitution is the fundamental framework of America's federal system of government. What are the three branches of the federal government? The Constitution separates the powers of federal government into three branches: legislative branch, or Congress, which makes the laws; the executive branch, or the presidency, which executes laws; and the judicial branch, or the federal judiciary, headed by the Supreme Court, which interprets the laws. What is the difference between the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence? The Declaration of Independence was written in 1776 during the Revolutionary War by Thomas Jefferson, edited by John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, among others, and adopted the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776, as it voted to declare independence from Great Britain. It included a list of grievances against King George III that justified separation from British rule and expressed the core principles upon which the United States was founded. The Constitution was written and signed by a group of delegates in 1787, years after the Revolutionary War was over, and ratified in 1788. Thomas Jefferson was not present at the Constitutional Convention. It remains the supreme law of the land today. Both documents were signed in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, then known as Pennsylvania State House, steps away from where the National Constitution Center now stands. What was the Articles of Confederation? How did it lead to the Constitutional Convention? Adopted by the Second Continental Congress on November 15, 1777, and ratified by the states in 1781, the Articles of Confederation was America's first framework of national government. Crafted during the American Revolution, it initially formed a wartime confederation of states. Overall, the Articles of Confederation created a weak central government, a league of friendship between the states that largely preserved state power and independence. While the document made official of some of the procedures used by the Continental Congress to conduct business, many Americans came to recognize the Articles of Confederation's many flaws. It created a national government centered on the legislative branch, which was composed of a single house. There was no separate executive branch or judicial branch. The delegates in Congress voted by state, with each state receiving one vote, regardless of its size. The national government did not have the power to tax or to regulate commerce between the states. And any proposed amendment to the Articles required unanimous approval from all 13 states. As a result, no amendment was ever ratified. Dang. Okay. The delegates of the Constitutional Convention eventually framed the new Constitution designed, in part, to address many of the Articles of Confederation's flaws. Alarmed by the need for greater economic cooperation, delegates from 5 states met in Annapolis, Maryland, in September 1786 to discuss revising the Articles of Confederation. These delegates included John Dickinson, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. They recommended a later meeting that might include all 13 states. On February 21st, 1787, the Confederation Congress agreed to call a convention of state delegates to meet in Philadelphia for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles. Instead of amending the Articles of Confederation, the convention delegates crafted an entirely new framework of government, the U.S. Constitution. It was a big FAQ. When and where was the Constitution drafted? The Constitution was drafted and signed in Philadelphia in the Assembly Room of Pennsylvania State House, now known as Independence Hall. The Constitution was created during the Philadelphia Convention, now known as the Constitutional Convention, which convened from May 25th to September 1787. It was signed on September 17th, 1787, and ratified on June 21st, 1788. Dang. 9 months later. Who was at the Constitutional Convention? Oh, that's why it was big. When did the Constitution go into effect? Oh. So it was not approved. It needed to be approved by the people through the state ratification process. Article 7 of the Constitution established the process for ratification, stating, the ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states, so ratifying the same. On June 21st, 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify, after Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, and South Carolina. And the Confederation Congress established March 4th, 1789, as a date to begin operating a new government under the Constitution, March 4th. Okay. The first modern Congress convened in New York City at Federal Hall. It was about 1 month before George Washington was elected as the first president under the new Constitution. Who wrote the Constitution? Because of James Madison's crucial role in drafting much of the Constitution, he's often referred to as the father of the Constitution. His notes of the proceedings, which were held in secret, also have provided valuable insights into the drafting process. But the Constitution was a result of months of thoughtful deliberation, debate, and compromise through the delegates. Many others besides James Madison made important contributions, particularly those who served on the Committee of Detail, which included Oliver Ellsworth, Nathaniel Gorham, Edmund Randolph, John Rutledge, and James Wilson, and those of the Committee of Style, which included Alexander Hamilton, William Johnson, Rufus King, and Gouverneur Morris. Other notable delegates included John Dickinson, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and George Washington, who served as president of the convention. What's the Bill of Rights? The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Congress proposed the first amendments to the state's ratification on September 25th, 1789. There were actually 12 proposed amendments, but 2, first concerning the number of constituents for each congressional representative, and second concerning the compensation of Congress members, were not ratified at the time. Only 10 were ratified to become the Bill of Rights and officially added to the Constitution December 15th, 1791. But the second unadopted amendment concerning compensation of Congress was eventually ratified on May 7th, 1992, as the 27th Amendment. Dang, 1992. As ratified, the Bill of Amendments only applies to abuses by the national government, not the states. However, following the ratification of the 14th Amendment and later decisions by the Supreme Court, the Bill of Rights became a charter of national freedom, applying key Bill of Rights protections like free speech and religious liberty to abuses by all levels of government, national, state, and local. This process is known as incorporation. Today, virtually all the key protections enshrined in the Bill of Rights apply with equal vigor against all levels of government. Okay. How have the American people used the amendment process to transform the Constitution? Let's see how loud I am. With the U.S. Constitution, the founding generation created the greatest charter of freedom in the history of the world. However, the founding generation did not believe that it had a monopoly of constitutional wisdom. Therefore, the founders set out a formal amendment process. Therefore, the founders set out a formal amendment process that allowed later generations to revise our nation's charter and form a more perfect union. They wrote this process into Article 5 of the Constitution. Over time, the people who have used this amendment process to transform the Constitution by adding a Bill of Rights, abolishing slavery, promoting freedom and equality, and extending voting rights to groups like African Americans and women. How many amendments does the Constitution have? The Constitution has a total of 27 amendments. Did any amendments fail to get added to the Constitution? As of 2018, more than 11,000 amendments have been proposed in Congress. Just 37 proposed amendments were approved by Congress for submission to the states. 27 approved, including the Bill of Rights. 1 amendment in the original Bill of Rights was rejected, and 6 other congressionally approved amendments weren't ratified by the states. Where is the Constitution? Is that the National Constitution Center? The original signed handwritten Constitution is at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. However, the National Constitution Center owns a rare original copy of the first public printing of the Constitution. This printing was published in a newspaper, the Pennsylvania Packet and Daily Advertiser, on September 19th, 1787, 2 days after the Constitution was signed. Because the convention was conducted under an oath of secrecy, this printing represents the first time that Americans, we the people, saw the Constitution. The Constitution Center also contains the first rare drafts of the Constitution in its American Treasures exhibit. Nice. Oh man, no amendments. This guy's handling the most badass thing ever come across the news. For which you guys met in secret for months, depending on how powerful the government could wreck everything. And they put everything into writing the Constitution power. Seriously. Okay, I'm gonna spread this. Secondary source, Richard Buman, The Constitutional Convention of 1787, Revolution Government. Here we go. All men are created equal. What is this about again? They're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that secure rights, governments, to among men, driving the powers with the consent of government. Connecticut Compromise. Beautiful. Nice ending. Okay, I think I could read this. You know, I'm just gonna speed read it again. Okay, let's do this. Okay, about the same. I guess read a little bit faster. You know what? 4 questions. Let's go. Article 6. Each phrase in the preamble to the Constitution is a powerful expression of its core principles. Popular sovereignty. Article 4 is privileges and immunities clause. What does this clause guarantee? Article 4. No. Complete this. I do not conceive that we are inspired, have more wisdom, or possess more virtue than those who will come after us. The power of the Constitution will always be with the people. Dang, all that 2 hours, and I just have 2%. Oh my god, there's a lot of reading in this. I need another exercise. Show us what you can do. Article 1 section. All legislative power herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of the Senate and House of Representatives. What's the purpose? Well, it doesn't show the three governments. Booyah. Statehood is not Article 1, Article 3. Article 2. Article 4. Article 7. The ratification of the conventions of the United States shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between states. Which statement best describes the significance of Article 7? Establishes that only some of the states will need to ratify the Constitution. Reserves specific rights for governments that the federal government does not have. Explains that states that have ratified the Constitution can submit amendments in the future. This is Article 6. Maryland approves an over-the-counter medication that treats common cold. However, the FDA has prohibited the sale of that medication because it's not approved by their department. Pharmacists in Maryland then have to stop selling the medication. What part of the Constitution gives the federal government power to prohibit the sale of the drug? Supremacy clause? When the hell did I learn this? Did I skip this? Yeah. Federal laws takes precedence. Okay, yeah. Ooh, quiz 1. I could get mastery. Let's see if I get mastery today. Alright, let's see. When having a constitutional conversation with someone, you should try to do what you want. Make sure you're asking questions and not political questions. Try to incorporate scholarly work into your answers. This is an excerpt from Article 4, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens. This is portable civil rights. To list the rights and freedoms that federal government cannot interfere with. To establish concept of birthright citizenship. To detail the requirements for naturalization. To guarantee the rights of citizens to be on the borders of home states. Well, it's just supremacy. Establishes federal law comes before state law when there are conflicts. Establishes office of the president. No, it states all laws must come from Congress. It states that change the Constitution. Federalist number 1. The doctrine. Okay. What is the purpose of the Federalist Papers? What is the purpose of Okay, for nothing can be more evident to those who take an enlarged view of a subject than the alternative of an adoption of a new constitution or its memorandum of union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that union, the certain evils, and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed to from its dissolution. Shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Not A, not C, so it's B or D. To argue the ratification of the Constitution. Oof. Complete this 1787 quotation from George the people. Ooh. Dude, what? What the hell is this? Oh, yeah. I don't get mastery until I take the unit test. Duh. Dang, 2 hours just for 3%. That's crazy. Hey, I'll watch. Okay.
The National Constitution Center presents Constitutional Questions with Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Article 5, Amending the Constitution. In the Constitution, our founders created the greatest charter of freedom in the history of the world. They understood, however, that they didn't have a monopoly on constitutional wisdom, and that's why they put in place a process for amending the Constitution, so that future generations could continue to use our foundational document to form a more perfect union. The founders were themselves constitutional reformers. They were men of the Enlightenment. They believed in human progress and learning from history and political theory. They wanted us to continue to perfect their framework without resorting to revolution, which, as they all knew, was often violent and destructive. In Article 5, the founders offered us a formal process for amending the Constitution, but the founders set a high bar for doing so, to limit it to changes that had broad support. The Constitution spells out more than one way for amendments to be proposed and ratified. An amendment can be proposed either in Congress or by the states. If in Congress, 2/3 of the Senate and the House of Representatives must approve the amendment. In the states, 2/3 of them must call for a convention to approve an amendment. If either of those things happen, the amendment moves on to the states for ratification. It must be ratified by 3/4 of the states to become part of the Constitution, and that can happen either by a vote in the state legislature or by the state itself holding a ratifying convention. And now, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch tells us more about our right to amend the Constitution.
We can amend our Constitution. People forget about that. But for most of our history, we had an amendment every 7 or 10 years. And that can be done by convention, as well as through legislative processes. And if people think sometimes it can't happen, well, the last one happened in 1992. And James Madison had a role there too, but so did a young person in college. The young person wrote a paper about an amendment that Madison had drafted, but it didn't go anywhere back at the founding. It had to do with salaries for congresspersons and whether they could be raised in the same term that Congress was serving, or whether they could only take effect in the future for the next Congress. And this young person thought that was a great amendment, and it had been ratified by a number of states, but not quite enough to become part of the Constitution. And then about in 1992, this young person picked it up, wrote a paper, I think got a poor grade for the paper, but managed to start a movement to get this Madisonian amendment 200 years later adopted, and it is the most recent amendment to the United States Constitution. So there you go. We the people can, through that kind of process, still have that kind of referendum activity.
All right, how many energy points do I get from watching this? 850. All right, I think I'm going to call it a night. This is a 2-hour stream. Wow, that was a lot of information and a lot of difficult reading. So, yeah, I actually look forward to learning more about this. I'm getting a little bit more acquainted with, contents of the Constitution, as well as the history of, what was behind it and why it was put into place. So, yeah, it was a really informative late night study session. If you're watching this after it's gone live, thanks for watching. But yeah, this was a really informative. I knew a handful of information, but there were some parts of this that were a good refresher and they were actually new to me. So I'm glad that I got to experience this. And yeah, I look forward to going live again. Thanks.